Hello, and welcome back around the bonfire. It's the show once again saying that if you score an own goal, you should have to do something else special for the goal to count. I think, Tim, that's where I'm sitting on things. It's John and Tim back after
Most prolific scorer in history.
Yeah, own goal. Yeah, showing up on the score sheet again. First time for the Fire this year. Chicago Fire surrendering a lead. Stop me if you've heard that one before. Late against FC Cincinnati to take a point away from TQL Stadium. It was an interesting night. It was kind of a long night, and it was maybe more than anything a frustrating night. Tim, you were live and in person. What was the vibe like as you were walking out of that glorious gift to Ohio soccer, TQL Stadium?
I mean, look, nobody, I think, from the Fire side was happy with it. I wasn't around the, FCC people other than those that were working in the stadium on my way out of the stadium. It felt, I think, the same to the teams it did to everyone else. It felt like a game that was 100% in their grasp that slipped away. I do think that one of the challenges was, it did feel a while like it was going to be FCC getting a fourth goal. And I think that to a certain extent, even though it's weird to say when, 20 minutes or so plus stoppage left, you're up by 2 goals if you're the Fire, it feels odd to be like, well, hey, they scraped by with a point. But I honestly think in some ways that would also be an acceptable reaction here, because if there was a fourth goal for either team, it was not going to go the Fire's way unless it was very against the run of play.
Look, shout out to anybody out there who may have, gone onto a certain website and predicted some markets about Evander over-under free kick opportunities, because if you took the over, you probably made out like a bandit. They were giving those out like candy towards the end of the game. So
not in the middle of the game. It was such a weirdly, I don't look complaining about the refs or whatever. Ultimately, I don't think that the officiating changed the tone of the game, and nobody got injured, which is the big thing, but it was just, I don't think he had good control of the game. I think he may be the youngest, if not, he's one of the youngest, if not the youngest center official in MLS this year. And look, I have no delusions that I could do any part of what a referee does. I could lace up my boots, I could get the outfit on. That's pretty much it.
You would look good in yellow.
Thank you. But it still felt like the game was not really under his control the whole time. And it was no cards for a while. He was getting boos in Cincinnati. We were confused in the press box. And then he just started writing everybody up at the end of the game, just giving out yellows like they're candy.
Yeah, look, one day I think at one point last year, we finally broke and just did 10 minutes on PRO, because I agree with you, Tim. No reasonable person looks at this game and says that's why the Fire didn't get all 3 points. But it's frustrating to watch when you say this game should be playing differently, and instead it's being reduced to stop and kick, stop and kick, stop and kick, right? Especially at the end of a very competitive, very two attack focused teams towards the end of that game. So I think it would have just been more fun, honestly.
And my big thing is guys didn't know what they could and couldn't do, right? Because it was called one way for the first couple of minutes, and then it was called a different way for the bulk of the interior part of the match, and then it was called a different way at the end. And players on both sides, I think, could be rightfully pissed off of why did I get called for that? Why didn't I get called? Why didn't he get called for that earlier when that happened to me? And the referee was getting boos, and he would have been, booed out of the stadium if the, host hadn't come up with 2 goals and wound up with a draw.
Well, hey, let's talk a little bit of the news that we have, and then we'll dive right back into the game here. Starting with the U.S. Open Cup update, it is official. Chicago Fire take on St. Louis City in the U.S. Open Cup round of 16. That'll be Wednesday, April 29th, 7:30 p.m. at SeatGeek Stadium. So take your butt to Bridgeview, and we'll beat those Provel people back to, south of the Mason-Dixon line, right? That's how the Mason-Dixon line works, I think.
Missouri was on the fence the entire time. They were like, There's quality people on both sides, and so they had people that fought on both. It's such a mix.
I see merit both ways, actually.
It's I don't know how you're neutral on that, but they managed to find a way.
They do a lot of horrendous things, to be fair. still even into the modern day. Let's not even talk about the water they drink. Moving on, if you didn't notice, if you were living under a rock, Jonathan Bamba missing out on Saturday. He's in France for personal reasons. No real updates there yet. Hopefully all is well with him and his family. Hopefully we'll see him back next weekend, but that remains to be seen at this point. Leo Barroso also missing out. I believe he traveled with the team, but not available for selection. Did not feature on the bench. Tim, I don't know if you have any better updates on Leo's injury.
Yeah, I mean, he did not travel with the team in this one. Yeah, unless he was hiding out somewhere when the rest of the team was around.
He could probably fit under the bus, I mean, to be fair.
There's probably large suitcases that he could fit in without too much trouble. No, I mean, look, it's unfortunate we haven't seen him in training. Like, I was a little surprised we saw Hugo Cuypers after really just at most one full training session. So, yeah.
Yeah. No.
So I was there in Cincinnati. How was your experience watching the game?
It was good overall. I was gonna say I wasn't. We talked about this a little bit. We made our way to Soccer House, new soccer themed bar, or I don't know if theme is the right word, right? But it's a new soccer bar. It's on Grand and Ogden. Yeah, soccer bar. That's the best way to say it. Grand and Ogden. It's if you know what is Twisted Spoke or the Broken Spoke.
It was Twisted Spoke for a very, very long time.
Yeah, the old biker. Well, it looked like a biker bar. I don't know if it was actually a biker bar. No, honestly,
it tried to be. It was and it wasn't.
Right.
If you were not a biker, like a lot of biker bars, like you don't just walk into and expect everything to be okay.
That's a theme. That's a biker themed bar. There's the difference.
Anyway. I mean, they had real biker there sometimes, but point taken. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Lucky enough to catch the game at Soccer House. I had a great time. Honestly, people were wonderful. If you guys don't know, I've said it before, but I'm a dues-paying member of Redline Supporters Group. It's like the official watch spot for Redline now. And it was a great time. The atmosphere was great. The employees were wonderful. Excited for when summer comes around and they can actually open up the rooftop. That'll be interesting. And yeah, truly, like if you're in that area, right, or really anywhere in the city and you're just looking for somewhere to watch a game, it's a good place to go. And for the record, there's no affiliation or sponsorship being passed, although we would honestly take it. It was just a good place to watch a game and good people running it. So worth checking out if you're a soccer fan in Chicago.
Wait, what was the weather like in Chicago yesterday?
It wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. It was, I feel like, I don't know, 60s-ish, 50s-ish.
60s, and you're not outside in the patio when the game's gone, man. Come on.
I think it was like 50s. I think it was 50s, to be fair. It just felt better because it was sunny.
That is noticeably above 15 degrees.
Tim,
come on.
Let's not criticize. Let's not criticize here. Okay, it was a positive experience. We enjoyed ourselves. It would have been a lot more fun with a win. And honestly, the biggest thing that stuck out to me, they had this cool little shop area. A bunch of books. They have some merch. They have some Stars stuff, which was actually really cool to see. And they had like vintage kits on sale. The prices were incredibly reasonable. I'm not going to say what was there because honestly, I want to go back and buy some of it. But stuff that probably could have been 2 or 3 times what it was. I was gobsmacked, and so were multiple other people with me.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, and I mean, I'm excited to check it out at some point. I'm really glad that it is opening up. I think that there's been a need, and there are soccer bars. I think that there's very few that are exclusively soccer, and there's not any that are really immediately in that area. Like I know Cleo's is mostly a soccer bar, or certainly has a lot of soccer, and is just not that far west from there. But I mean, if there's a basketball game on, or an important any Chicago sporting event game, like that is going to be on every TV there, and you will not be able to get any soccer on. So it's great to have a place where like that is the home, that is the focus. Like if there is soccer on and there's soccer on somewhere in the world at some like every point of the day, like that is what's going to be on the TVs there.
I was going to say, I think I told you this last night. It was like I got there like right at kickoff, just made it. Traffic was insane because of course it was. And I'm looking through kind of the menu and everything, and I see the little note. It's like, oh, like opening at 9:30, and I wish I could remember the game. It was 9:30 for Premier League, and they were staying open. I mean, Saturday night in Chicago. Of course, you're staying open, but they were doing Toluca, and I don't remember the team they were facing at 10:30 p.m. kickoff. Right, so it truly is like you can be there if you really wanted to be somewhere for 14 hours watching soccer in a day. Like you could be there.
Yeah, which is just great to have that option.
Exactly. And one of those things where we always talk about what's the thing I always say? You want to build a community, you build it together. You want to have these spaces, you also need to support them. So go do that. Like I said, nothing official, but good people doing a good thing. So go support it if you're in the city. Last little bit that we'll talk about here, Chris Brady officially makes his 100th league start. You pointed out, Tim, it's a few more than that if we're counting playoffs and cups and all that kind of stuff, but 100 league MLS starts for Chris Brady. He just turned 22.
Regular season. I still think you have to count the MLS playoffs if you're MLS. Like, it's your competition.
But it's like a cup
League's Cup is like halfway in there, so, you know.
Yeah. But no, I mean, you said it on Twitter. I think it was 22 years old, 100 starts in the league. It's insane to think about. It's a guy you're wondering why he's not getting more buzz, internationally, both for the U.S. men's national team and also potentially, looking to move over to Europe. But I got to tell you, man, I'm happy to have him as long as nobody else wants to pay an exorbitant amount of money for a goalkeeper.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, again, like, I don't know. There is a possibility that just being named to the World Cup roster could change his trajectory. He's given a new contract, so he's under team control for a long time. But that cuts both ways, right? Like, he could play out his deal, or that could be there so that the Fire do get that return on Brady if he does get sold on.
Yeah. Well, maybe not his best performance, unfortunately, on his 100th night, but we'll talk about that a little bit here. Let's go into our recap. It was a game reminiscent of the 2025 Fire. Hugo Cuypers was the man of the town. 2 goals off 2 different volleys. Really incredible finishes from the Belgian in his first game back. Tim, you also wrote in the 5 things that maybe if you want to expand on this a little, also allowing Philip Zinkernagel to take the penalty after he had scored his first goal. So had the opportunity for the hat trick. Passed it off. It says something about the kind of leader he is, right?
Yeah, right. Like, I called him Hugo the Selfless Striker. And I think that that's just kind of what he was doing there. I asked Greg about it because you never know. Like, sometimes teams have a strict rotation. Sometimes there's a designated penalty taker, and it's either them or somebody is doing something they shouldn't be doing, right, if they're on the pitch. And Greg told us that, like, Hugo was number 1 and Zink was number 2. And he decided, Hugo, that is, on the pitch, to just give the ball to Zink. And Greg pointed out that says a lot about how selfless he is and the kind of athlete he is. Early on, there was a lot of stuff about, like, Zink's slow start, and is this going to be, how big of a drop will it be from last year, 30 goals, goal contributions in MLS regular season, 15 goals, 15 assists. It's going to be a drop off. We knew that. But after not getting any goal contribs in the first 5 games, he's now had 4 in the past 3. 2 of them last night, a goal and an assist. And, so that is firmly in the past, right? Like, any slow start is not the reality for the state he's in now. And part of that's because Hugo was selfless, right? And asking Hugo about it, this actually made Joe Chats, who was, joined via Zoom, like, actually stop and laugh. He said, well, I scored already, which is so funny. Like, yeah, you're a striker, and like, he's on the outside, but like on the periphery of the Golden Boot race, right? Like, Sam Surridge and one other player, I think, have
Messi.
Well, yeah, Sam Surridge and Messi have 7 goals, and it's Peter Musa that has 9. And
yes.
But like, there's a bunch of people that have 6, but he is in that conversation, and he would have 7. He would be tied with Messi and Sam Surridge for number 2 on that list. And there's every reason to think that Hugo could stay in the conversations and not want to advance that. Especially because look, Hugo's in a contract year, right? Like, that's the other side of it. There's an option on him for 2027. Fire have been rumored to be signing another striker, a certain Polish guy, and like, Hugo's on a mission to make himself indispensable, whether that's for the Fire or for whoever gets him next, and he's been doing it so far because his numbers are elite. I wrote in the 5 things about his underlying numbers. He does stuff that, in terms of interrupting those contributions that he makes to, like, breaking things up, to the way that he presses, all of that kind of stuff that no other elite forward in this league is doing. And that's stuff that you won't get if you sign a guy that is, closer to the start of his 5th decade than his 4th.
Yeah, well, and let's keep the ball in Hugo, right? I mean, look, everybody knows what happened with Cincy: a penalty, an own goal from Jay Davila, and an unfortunate howler from Chris Brady that let Tom Barlow get on the score sheet. Ultimately, end up being the even goals for Fire and Cincinnati. But to continue on Hugo, look, I think what I wrote down here, he's got 6 goals in 5 appearances. The question is, where does he rank among the league's best? I think I've said this consistently, but last night I was very adamant about it because, I don't know, I was all jazzed up watching him do it again. I think he's the most complete striker in the league. Like, when you account for 100% of the roles that he takes on, I don't think there's anybody better. Now, I would 100% say, Sam Surridge, Peter Musa, both probably better goal scorers, right? And numbers probably bear that out to an extent. This is the same argument you and I think have both used about the Robert Lewandowski question, which is maybe you're getting 3 or 4 more goals a year, specifically in the air. That's one thing Hugo is not very good at. He is not somebody who can get in the air and score goals with his head in traffic. But what you're losing from box to box and from everywhere else, I just feel like, man, I don't think there's anybody doing everything at a level higher than Hugo is right now.
I completely agree. I mean, and the interrupting, like I said, is something that is huge and a big part of his game that no one else is giving you. I mean, he's obviously been scoring goals, and like he's also a really good teammate to the people around him, and like that's not something you always get with the highest quality goal scorers, just because it's, I think, a position where you have to have a certain amount of belief in yourself to be able to do it consistently, and that can go from being good to being delusional and into toxic pretty quick, as we've seen however many times with whatever leagues around the world you watch.
Yeah, well put. And I mean, look, you wrote about it in the 5 things, and just to maybe cap what you said there, like, just seems like a good, reasonable person. And that's not something, to your point, that's not something you find from the guy who's going to score 20 goals for you in all competitions, right?
And the other thing about it, like, this is kind of obvious if you've been listening, but like, he was out, right? Like, he 1.5 training sessions basically, and he looked like he didn't miss a beat. And asking him about it after, as a head injury, like, it's not like a muscle thing where you're able to go 60% and 75% and then whatever. Like, his body was fine, but head injuries are also scary, and you're still not in the rhythm of the thing that you're doing every day. Like, you get out of practice with anything you do in life, and it's hard to just step right back into it. And that's exactly what Hugo did.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, went a full 90, right? Like, just from a fitness point of view, that is not nothing.
Yeah. I mean, and again, like, that's what, he talked about that with his body being, not injured, and, he was able to, I think, to do some conditioning, but not a lot, and certainly not at a high level. So,
I mean, we've talked about it at length. I think we can kind of move it there. The last thing I'll say is, somebody asked, like, directly, like, if they move on from him for Lewandowski, what do you think they'll get? And I was like, look, I think somewhere in that 10 to 15 million range. We've talked about, can they? There's sell-ons and stuff, I believe, to Ghent, but it's, could he eclipse his initial total, which was, if I remember correctly, around 12 million? I don't see why not. And I'm looking at the teams playing right now, LAFC and San Jose, both near the top of the table. Not LAFC, but you look at San Jose, they don't really have like a star striker. Would Bruce Arena go out and splash 12, $13 million on a guy like Hugo Cuypers, who is not going to give you the same problems Chicho Arango and Joseph Martinez gave you of the effort, of the potentially off the field stuff, locker room stuff, and just give you great play on both ends of the field and also 20 goals?
I mean, look, that's an open question, right? Because the Quakes, I mean, one of the things that Bruce Arena is very good at, in like ways that I don't understand, because you see him and you're not like charismatic dude, could convince me to do anything. He's convinced multiple billionaires to start spending a lot more money than they've been willing to on their soccer teams. And like, I can't, again, I don't know why. Like, it's just, it just is what it is. John Fisher has been spending more money. Part of it's that the team is reportedly for sale. And so maybe that's part of it, is you want to be successful and have a full building, and when people start looking hard at the books, say like, here's the progress we've made financially. But, I mean, look, that's a possibility. I do hope that he stays in Chicago.
Agreed. 100%. Let's talk about the other end of the field, Chris Brady, just a little bit. early howler. I think the interesting thing here is he still stays positive in terms of his preventing. I mean, like I agree, but it's also like, hey, you should stop that. Sorry for people who are just listening to audio. Tim kind of gave me that like, come on, really? Look.
Well, I mean, it was it a preventable goal? Yes. I mean, but anyway, I'll let you go on. Sorry.
No, I think if we're gonna praise, we have to criticize too, right? But point I wanted to make, he remained positive on his expected goals prevented, right? 4.12 expected goals for San Francisco. I don't know where that came from. Cincinnati. Obviously 3 goals allowed with that one own goal, which I don't know, man. I'm not blaming that on Chris Brady. As far as I'm concerned, he let in 2 goals last night.
0 ways that any human being could have saved that. It would have been impossible. And I mean, look, you let Evander score a pin on you, like that.
Which he guessed right, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, but that just goes to the point of like he's very good at what he does at scoring goals, and he hasn't been doing it this year. But like giving a guy a pin is a great way to get them back into it, which was Hugo Cuypers' thinking, right? Of like, let me get the ball to Zink from the spot, and he will score another goal and have 2 on the year, and then it's completely out of his head. And Evander had the same opportunity to get his first of the year. So, but look, one of the other 5 things is funny that you mentioned that. Chris Brady is, if you look at goals, minus expected, the best goalie in MLS this year. And like the only one that, I mean, Hugo Lloris is a little bit better, like a shade better on a 90-minute basis. Now, that's going into the game that's happening right now in San Jose. So, who knows if that's still going to be the case. It's 0-0 at half. And I mean, LAFC have had a lot of clean sheets this year. But at the same time, Brady is still getting better. I think it's fair to say Hugo Lloris's best days are probably behind him.
You think
and
so?
That's, yeah, just going out on a limb here. And that just goes to show how special of a player the Fire have. And like, look, not all of it is on Brady. Like, this is my big thing in the past, especially 2024, when a lot of Brady's numbers didn't look great. Most statistics are not actually individual stats, right? Like, you throw Lionel Messi on a rec league team and like he will score a bunch of goals if you're playing in a rec league. You throw the rec league team into MLS and Messi's not going to score any goals because, like he just isn't. The team's not going to give him enough to get into this places to do it. And goalie stats especially depend on the defense and stuff like that around you. And even advanced statistics, there's XG is like, where is the shot taken from? Post-shot expected goals or X goals on target is like where does the shot go and where does it land and how likely is a goalkeeper to save that? A goalkeeper can know to do the right thing, but they could not. But there's times when they couldn't afford to be in the right position because it's not just I'm focused on this guy taking the shot. It's there's 4 runners streaming into the box. The center backs I don't even know where they are. Like there's a wing back that, as far as I know, is still like back at the other box. And you're kind of left to dry a little bit in those situations. And that was happening too often with Brady, and his underlying numbers weren't as good as a result. That's not the case this year, and his numbers have been shining, but he's still, just in terms of pure shot stopping, has been absolutely elite. He has let in preventable goals. Like, you please, like, show me a goalie that does not do that. But overall, he's just been outstanding.
100%. Like I mentioned on the preview, I was on the CHGO show last week, and that was the point I made to Alex, who's very hyped on Chris Brady, as he should be. And I was like, look, this is also the first time we've seen him with a competent defense. Like, and I'm not using that lightly. Like, we have not seen him with a good back line in front of him since he started playing for Chicago Fire. Like, it just hasn't happened, right? God love Rafa Chihos, God love Carlos Terran. Like, it just was not comparable to what we're dealing with now, although there may be some parallels. Ultimately, you're seeing it for the first time. But, Tim, we do have to talk about the bad things that happened, unfortunately, though I would love to pretend they didn't. Look, the Fire... Oh, is it?
Yeah, look, I just think that this is a good transition point because... you said the back line in front of him. This was bad defending from the Fire. I mean, but yeah, I don't think that it was 100%. Bad defending exclusively by the back line. And I think that blaming the back line for this is not going to solve the problem if that's where your focus is.
No, look, I think, to be honest, that there are probably three or four names I would throw out in terms of people who kind of hung Chris Brady out to dry last night. Not intentionally, of course, right? Just how sports work. But let's kind of start from the top. Fire were pretty thoroughly outplayed as the second half wore on. Some of that might have been the referee being a little more touchy, but they also weren't able to hold possession as consistently. 3 total shots in the second half, only 7 touches in the opposition box. Cincinnati had over 25 in the Fire's box. And the passing accuracy here stood out to me, 69%. This is from a team that normally hovers between 85 and 90, right? So we're talking about a pretty stark drop off there. They outmatched in their duels, both losing by, we're talking like 60-40 and 70-30 in terms of ground and aerial duels respectively. Just not a great performance from the Fire. And then you have the discipline late in the game, right? I think maybe you alluded to it wasn't the back line. We'll talk about maybe reason number 2, but reason number 1, you have to look at Jay Davila, not his best performance without the own goal, right? And then you take into account just not being aware of where the ball is, and you put it in your own net.
Yep, it was too casual when defending in the box, I think is the long and short of it. And look, could something like that have happened to anybody? Yes. Did it seem like on the night Jay Davila, it was more likely to happen to him than it would be to most players in the course of a game? Yes, 100%. And I mean, that's the way the cookie crumbles. It comes after Jay was subbed off early a week ago in league play and didn't start in the Open Cup, although I don't read anything into that. But it does sort of seem like we've talked about his talent level, like that has not changed. It's the execution, and so much of that is mental. And it seems like right now he's not in a good headspace. He was visibly pissed when coming off last week, and I think this week, frankly, there was a strong argument that he should have come off significantly earlier, and if he had, it would not be the same game, right? I mean, you never know. Like, another player could have scored no goal, like whatever else. But it just seems like keeping him on, especially for 90, was maybe not the right choice, especially considering that is a position where there are other players that are capable, veterans and young players that can do the job, and frankly may have just been in a better headspace than he was in that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe we've talked a lot about how you can use your starting 11 to kind of build the best group, right? How do you get all your best players on the field, but then also how do you complement good players, right? Like I mentioned to you, and there's nothing really to talk about with these guys because they came on so late, but Dylan Borso and Pouso Ditejan playing on the right side together, a little bit of a nightmare. Those just 2 young guys who don't necessarily know where they need to be 100% of the time, getting very, very deep into midfield with just leaving themselves wide open. And I wonder if maybe, you look at Philip Zinkernagel comes off, Joel Waterman comes in. Not the best shift from Joel. I don't want to look too harshly at him, but could that move have been for Mauricio Pineda instead? You bolster the midfield. You give Jay a real partner to work with. Let Anton also kind of, float between, a little more box to box. And maybe now he's able to focus in a little better. His eyes aren't darting all over the place. He's not looking for every play. And he can maybe settle in a little more, right? Even if you don't want to remove him from the game, I think you still had opportunities to make his job easier.
Yeah, and I think that it was a curious case going to 3 center backs from 2, right? Because that means that the center backs it changes their spacing. Teams kind of go to a back 3, including the Fire, a lot of the time go to sort of a back 3 in certain phases of the game where one of the D mids, and I think a lot of the time that would have been Jay, it's Anton in some situations too, kind of hangs back with the 2 center backs, so it becomes a back 3 effectively. That doesn't happen when you've got 3 center backs back there, so you're changing things. And look, on one hand, are these professionals? Yes. Do they practice this? Yes. So they should be able to do it. At the same time, it's a lot to ask people to shift fairly late in the game, and obviously didn't work out for the Fire in this case. I think that there were maybe some assumptions that this was a defensive-oriented sub, and I see that in some ways. I think the other reason that you go to a back 3 is so that you can push for more numbers forward, even at the expense of Zinkernagel coming off, because I think part of it was it did sort of seem like Zinkernagel didn't have a ton in the tank at that point. And some of it's, like the like the unused subs in the game were Jason Shukaluk, Sergio Orhel, Mauricio Pineda, David Pareba, and Josh Cohen. Like I would have liked to see Pareba potentially come on for Zinc. I would have liked to see Jason Shukaluk. I mean, maybe even Sergio Orhel. And if you wanted a defensive stability type sub, I mean, I don't know exactly the way you would have done it. Made sense. Like I can see a strong case for Maury to be the guy on.
Let me kind of, we talked about this a little bit pre-show, but let me float this and kind of maybe you can land it a little better than I can because you're smarter than me. It does feel like Cincinnati, not a team right now with strong forwards, right? That's not really where they're going to make their money if they make it, right? Especially with Kevin Denke out. Tom Barlow had already left, so you're on your third choice striker at that point, right? Ostensibly, nothing's a perfect one-to-one. Fire fans know that well. And instead of keeping the strength where Evander will be operating, which is just outside the box, potentially in transition and wide, you kind of consolidated all of it into the box. And now, it's really well put. And I apologize, I don't remember the exact name of the Cincinnati account that posted it, but they did a really wonderful breakdown. It was like the War Chief or War Pigs or something like that. A really wonderful breakdown of like, this was just a perfect pass from Evander, right? He put it exactly where the only guy who could get to it was his guy. Chris Brady wasn't going to get there. Mboazi wasn't going to get there. And ultimately, what that comes down to is you didn't have enough people outside of the box to actually account for the best player on the field for Cincinnati, right? And he's allowed to make that play, and it leads to a penalty because Mboazi is slightly out of position. Dotto throws an elbow into his back. They both fall, and it was rightfully called a penalty.
Exactly. And like a little bit of that is awareness on Mboazi's part, right? Like I think that
100%.
Is, and I think that you have to give credit where credit's due with Mboazi. I think that, for a while we were pretty harsh on him. And this is the kind of stuff that we were talking about because this hadn't happened, but it was these stuff that felt like it could happen. And it did. And like I looked up a lot of the underlying numbers, especially using the goals added metric. I did that I put that in the 5 things. And, right now, by the numbers, Mboazi is not appearing to be an elite center back. And there's a certain extent to which you're like, well, yeah, but then the numbers are wrong because that's not the eye test. But both things are true. He has those abilities, like those highlight reel things do happen, but then he costs you some stuff the other way, and costing the penalty makes the goal contributions that he's, like the defense that he's had, the defensive contributions, and what he's had for the Fire going the other direction, it takes a lot of that out in terms of the plus minus. It becomes a wash and a slightly negative. And I think it was like 46th or 47th out of 122 players listed as center backs in MLS this year. Middle third. It's like just outside the top third, and that does not line up with the talent that we know Mboazi has. And that's Jack Elliott last week called him raw, right? And that was after a man of the match performance. He is incredibly talented. He can be a man of the match, but he also is going to make mistakes. And look, the last thing on this, really, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think the key point for us here is, like, we're not being critical. We're being honest, right? Like, he's a very good player. I still think almost every team in MLS would take him over one of their starting center backs for the upside, for his raw talent. He's going to make 2 or 3 of those incredible, goal line saves, game-saving tackles. He made a few of them in this game, but what he's also doing is being a little reckless with his clearances. He's getting out of position because he knows his speed can account for it. He's recycling play for the attack a lot. If you go back and watch these games, or even live, watch where his clearances go. They go right back to the attack, to the opposing team, right? And all it does is kind of give them an opportunity to set up. And now that's some clearances are always going to do that, maybe most of them. But it's a very consistent theme of, instead of taking a touch, controlling the ball, and maybe then still clearing it out, it's just, I'm going to hit this volley and hope that one of our guys finds it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, some of that is maybe the right thing to do. I think he does hospital ball a little bit too much, too quick. But one thing about this, like he clearly is a very, very smart player, and he clearly has just been able to step into MLS and look, pretty good and do amazing things a lot of the time. And that's not easy to do. That's something you basically never see anyone do. And that's all to his credit. there's been a lot of talk about like how long will he be here for? When will he be going? We've talked about it here. MLS is quite possibly the best league in the world. I mean, I just can't think of another one for him to be learning these things in. Like, well, you know what I mean? Like, I can't think of another. Like, what would the better league be? Right? Like, he's like in. Like, you could maybe argue of leagues that are of like similar caliber. I mean, like, was he going to go to Brazil? Like, no, he's not going to the Brazilian league. Like, is he going to go to the Champo in England? Like,
but even the championship doesn't. And this I don't know, people might get mad at this. I don't think the championship has, on average, the attacking talent that MLS has.
No, I mean, you don't have Lionel Messi, lacing up his boots. Yeah,
but you don't really have like Hugo Cuypers either. Like, I don't know.
No, you don't. And teams spend, and MLS is a very athletic league, is a very fast league. There's things that you get from the pace of, the top leagues in the world that you get in MLS. You also get like some center backs on like the reserve minimum, and so you've got like Lionel Messi facing a guy making $100K a year. And
it works pretty well for Jonathan Dean, to be fair.
That's true. And like sometimes the guy that's not making that much money looks pretty good at the end of the night. I mean, but look, in MLS, like in the Champo, if he was in a team that was like working towards the end of the season, like around this time of year, probably a few weeks earlier, but to get into a promotion spot, and he makes mistakes like this, you're not seeing him again, possibly ever, and like likely, almost certainly for any moment that matters for the rest of the season. If the team works its way out of the hunt, then like, sure, maybe he gets some minutes to try to put him in a shop window, and maybe the manager's done with him. Maybe like the manager leaves at the end. Like no other league in the world is going to give him starts week in, week out when he has all this promise, but is still kind of falling short of where he is, like what he's capable of. And it's not the only thing that MLS can do, and it's not the only thing that MLS can be, but it can be a place where elite talent is fostered.
Yeah, no, well put. Look, last thing I think we can talk before we get out of here. We talked, it's only fair. We talked about how big of an opportunity this next 8 weeks is for the Fire. I think it's only right to now look back and say, how much did you miss, right? I know it's obvious the answer is 2 points, right? But how big of a blow is this on a night where now you get jumped by Miami and Charlotte, as both win on the road, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. And you pull a point back. It's not a terrible performance. I think in February we would have said a point in Cincinnati. That's pretty good. But with the way this game played out and with the way these teams have played, it does feel like a disappointment, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, it was a winnable game for the Fire, right? And I think that last year the thing was, it was a better Cincinnati team on the whole. Certainly not having the issues they were this year. Maybe, maybe Pat Noonan figures things out. There's this entirely possible. Like, we've seen most of these guys do elite things in this league, and even if some of them maybe are not quite at that level anymore, you still think that they could get it back, and maybe this is the thing that galvanizes them. Maybe this is we fought back, we got a result, and Evander's finally made the score sheet, and they start steamrolling after this, right? It's not the most likely thing, but it's possible. I think that, for the Fire, it's maybe a little bit of a reality check. At the same time, like, I think that they're kind of where a lot of us felt like they would be in the standings. I mean, it's still very early, because on the night, like the Fire could have ended up, I think, as low as something like 8th. If like every single team, that was capable of going ahead of them went ahead of them. Like, that's just like 2nd to 8th, and after one result is like, it's still early if things are that compressed. And the Fire are tied with Charlotte on points, and 1 point behind Miami. So it's not like they are ceding too much ground, but felt like a win was there, and last year against Cincinnati, it didn't really feel like a win was that close. And that was sort of the story of the Fire, was like, they can beat a lot of teams, they really struggle against elite teams, unless the elite team is Inter Miami. But then comes the question, what was Inter Miami?
Or unless it's one of the 2 best teams in the league in Vancouver and Miami, right?
Yeah, I mean, and like the Vancouver game, like, again, not trying to take away from that, but that was early in the season, right? Like, it was, and there were a lot of players missing because of international play. And
on both sides.
MLS, yeah, exactly, on both sides. And MLS playing through the break. And, who knows? Maybe it was just, Greg getting in his son's head with the bet that they had about whoever won had to pay for dinner, and Seb was too focused on that. And
Seb has been spending too much of his money on whatever you spend your money on in Vancouver. He's like, I can't pay for this dinner.
Literally everything in Vancouver, because it's not a cheap place to live.
True, that is true. I wasn't even in Vancouver. I was in Whistler, and I was like, what the hell's going on here? That was 10 years ago. So I can only imagine. God, it feel old to say I was there 10 years ago, but that's how that works, I suppose. Look, I think that just about does it for us. I think the one positive of a potentially disappointing result here is you now go to take on Sporting Kansas City a week from yesterday, a week from Saturday, I should say, and now you are hopefully entering with a poor taste in your mouth and the desire to wash it out, if that makes sense.
Look, it just goes to show, like, the Fire, we've seen what they can be. We've seen them get multiple clean sheets in a row at this point, right? But it's not going to be automatic. They still have to work for it. And like it's things like this that are a reminder to sort of check yourself and know that you have to put in that work. A lot of things didn't go right in Cincinnati. The team still got a point despite it. And if that's the low point, because remember last year, like the Fire are not far, we talked about this, like far apart from where they were in the standings a year ago at this point in the season. And what happened was the Fire kind of hit a skid of not getting results, and it was around this time of year that the Nashville, 7-2 loss came up, and that sort of became the turning point of like that was as low as it's going to get. And honestly, it feels like this could be as low as the Fire are going to get. Not that they're never going to lose a game again, but to lose a game where they had an XG differential this big, so much of it coming in one half and not really having answers despite having a lead late, like that, like. This could be the only time this year that we see this. And if that's true, the ceiling on this team's a lot higher.
Yeah, no, well put. Yeah, well put. I think that's as good a place as any to wrap it. Tim, as you were talking there, I realized that, what episode was this? Now it's going to bug me that I don't remember. There were 2 episodes ago now. 3 episodes? This is 21? Yes. So the review of, what game was that? Gosh, my brain is not good. Nashville? No. Anyway, 2 episodes ago.
Would have been Nashville if it was 3 games. If it was last week, it was Atlanta. If the week before, it was Nashville.
There we go. From the Atlanta review, I promised a sticker to somebody if we got more than 5 comments on YouTube. We did. So I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I'll send one of you a sticker. I will message you on YouTube somehow.
We'll find a way to reach out. We can give you an email address or something in the comments.
Exactly. So yeah, we're going to do that again. I'm going to keep doing this until we have to get like 100 comments. Another 5 comments, another sticker's going out. We're doing this, folks. Sorry to derail us there, Tim. But
actually, that's a good reminder. We will start checking the comments and making sure to, not necessarily read them on the air, but at least like be involved and be aware and respond to them.
Oh, I always read them.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I try to keep an eye. I want to know if people are insulting me. No,
I just assume they're insulting me. So.
Fair enough. A lot of them are Tim hate comments. That is true. No, none of them are. Cool. Look, before we get out of here, like I said, stickers. Number 2. I've seen this buzzing around on Twitter a little bit. I wanted to mention it. I think you'll agree with me, Tim, even though we didn't really talk about it. A lot of buzz around Vancouver Whitecaps potentially being sold and potentially leaving Vancouver. Some fans, some supporter groups have started SaveTheCaps.com, where you can sign a petition to tell the ownership group, and I believe the city of Vancouver and BC at large, we want to keep the Caps here. I think you would agree with me. MLS is better with the Caps in Vancouver. So if you go to SaveTheCaps.com, you can sign their petition. You can also use #SaveTheCaps on social media. Do it. Right, there's no harm in it. They're a great franchise, and hopefully their next owner will see the value in keeping them in Vancouver and in British Columbia to continue to represent that.
Yeah, I mean the Caps have been such a good story lately. The fans are passionate. It's a team that has deep history, like as deep as like the Sounders in the in the States for anyone that is more familiar with that. Like going back decades before MLS, and it's a special market. I think it's a difficult market just because of the geography of the city, plus what land is valued at has made it virtually impossible for a stadium to come through. And Canada doesn't have as many just like random billionaires hanging around as the United States does. So I think that's a challenge for just finding a knight in shining armor to show up and with a truck or multiple trucks full of money that can build a stadium and finance it themselves and like all that kind of stuff. And so it's a challenging spot, but the league is better with Vancouver in it. I mean, look, there maybe are other teams, like other cities out there that would also be good that don't have teams now, but like you can expand, like, Phoenix can get a team, Detroit can get a team at some point, like Indianapolis can get a team, like that's
let's
fine.
not give Detroit a team, okay?
Look, to some extent, like it's a big city. You can't deny it's a major city and it's a major sports city. So like if it's one of those things that it's a huge city. Like the metro population is there. The city itself is not.
I'm just messing with you.
Come on. And it's like it's the same thing to a little bit of a lesser extent with Phoenix. Like Phoenix is also a huge market. I get that the weather there's a challenge, the schedule shift up, like all this stuff expand. Like MLS is 30 teams. You've already expanded past the point that any league in this sport really has a right to. Why not just keep on going?
Tim, what if they went up to 40 teams, and then what if they like split it into two 20-team leagues, and then they could they could have good teams in one, not as good teams, and then they could like switch occasionally. What do you think about that?
The league has actively studied that. I think that we've talked about this. Like this, it's a realistic possibility. There's other possibilities out there. Or if you go to having 35 teams, you play a 34-game season and you play every team once. Like, I don't know. Like, there's stuff you can do.
No, Tim, we need to have 5 divisions, and there needs to be 3 different tables, but playoffs only matter on one of the table. Okay, no, I'm just having fun. Anyway.
Is this before or after MLS expands to Europe?
This is during the expansion, actually.
Okay.
It's kind of the transition year. Yeah.
Right.
We're also going to work in Argentina just because obvious reasons, right? The money of it all.
Maury's kid is going to be one of the first draft prospects to go and play for the London Knights. Put it on your calendars, everyone.
Gosh, I always find it funny when they're like, oh, the teams in London should be called the London Redcoats. It's like that's a very American thing. I don't think they would have
They don't associate.
I don't think they would
that.
Get that. Yeah,
they're actually actively trying to make people forget about when that happened.
No, what? They don't like the colonialism? All right. Anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. As always, it's a pleasure and a joy to be here. I feel like I cut Tim's colonialism joke off, but who knows? Maybe that one's for the best. We appreciate y'all being here. Stay tuned to the website, meninred97.com. It's where you can stay up to date with all the news, analysis, opinions, and anything else we feel like putting up on there. But meninred97.com is where you can find the most up-to-date Chicago Fire news and coverage. You can also follow us on socials, meninred97, anywhere and everywhere that matters. Again, that's where you'll find all of our work, some fun stuff, some interesting stuff, and maybe a snarky tweet every now and then as well. Who's to say? And last but not least, wherever you're listening, if you could go ahead and give us a like, a subscribe, a comment on YouTube if you want a sticker. Maybe. You got to win. We're picking people. It's not everybody. But it's every 5 comments is 1 sticker. So if hypothetically, if you leave 100 comments, you could end up with a bunch of stickers if you're the only one who comments. Just saying. Yeah, so we'll keep that running. I'll keep telling people. But if you can like and subscribe and all that fun stuff, we'll have Hot Takes back soon as well. And we're looking forward to having the Open Cup back in Chicago too. All of that is to say thank you so much for being here, for our illustrious producer Austin, for Tim. I'm John. Thank you so much for joining us around the bonfire, and come on, you men in red.